This is Money Made Simple, the financial podcast that keeps it simple and gets to the point. Kia ora and welcome to Money Made Simple, brought to you by Simplicity. Hi Liv.
Hi Jennie.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. We are going to do a special episode today that's actually going to come out in about a month from when we're recording, but it's going to be really close to International Women's Day, which is the 8th of March.
Correct.
And we thought we'd do a bit of a focus on the retirement savings gap, because we think that's something really important for women to think about.
And men, I think.
Oh, true.
As our allies. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at some of the stats, like what is that gap, what does it mean, how does it affect us, and why it exists, like what creates the gap. You can't fix something if you don't understand how it comes about. And then we're going to look at some practical things that people can do, women in particular, but like you said, women and men can do to try and address that.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's dig into the data quickly. So we often hear people talking about the gender pay gap. Yes. So that reflects the difference in average earnings between men and women. So that's a well-known thing, well published in the media. But retirement savings is actually another place that we really see gender inequality show up, particularly in New Zealand.
Yes, and while the gender income gap is closing quite slowly, although there's been a bit of progress in the last year, the retirement savings gap isn't closing.
No. So the Retirement Commission, which is a government agency, publishes data regularly, and in 2025 they published some research in June, so about 6 months ago. We'll link to the study, that research in the show notes. But they basically showed that the overall KiwiSaver gender retirement savings gap is around 25%. And that has remained, I know, and that has remained roughly steady year on year. So unlike the gender income gap, that is not closing.
Okay. And does that differ with age? Does that get worse at the end?
Yes, thanks to our magic of compounding returns, which we covered in a recent episode. The average KiwiSaver balance across ages widens with age.
Right.
So as people's balances compound, the smaller balances of women compound a lot less than the larger balances of men. So the average balance across all ages, as of December 31st, 2024.
Yep, so just over a year ago.
Yep, was $42,664 for men, so average balance for men, and then $34,185 for women. So that's a total gap, average gap of around $8,500.
Yeah, which is not a small amount of money.
No, and that savings gap, as I said, widens with age. So a little bit earlier on in their 40s, men have roughly $12,000 or 30% more in their KiwiSaver than women. And then in the 50s, that gap widens to around $20,000 or 36% more. And then for those aged 56 to 65, so when you're reaching near retirement, it widens to around 36 or 37% gap. So that gap is getting bigger as those balances grow.
Yeah, I mean, 25 sounded bad as the sort of average gap, but if you are retiring with 36 to 37% less than your male counterparts, that's... Yeah.
It's a little bit scary. And women, interestingly, make up this very slight majority of KiwiSaver members in New Zealand, so around 51%.
Right.
So almost even, yet they make up a much larger proportion of those with under $10,000 balances. So women are over-indexing in those low balances.
Yeah, so we've talked a bit about women and investing and some of the barriers, and it's interesting that even though we are good investors and we're getting better even, and we're investing in higher numbers, that gap is still really stubborn when it comes to retirement savings.
Yeah, so those early balance differences really do grow over the decades, meaning the small gap at 30. So say you and your partner have a $5,000 difference between your KiwiSaver balances, that is going to grow and is shown by the research that the Retirement Commission do to become much larger by 60.
Yeah, so it is really hard to catch up once that gap has started.
Yeah. So let's cover why the gap exists.
Okay, so in my understanding, there are kind of three forces at play and they reinforce each other a little bit. And the first one you mentioned earlier, and that is the income difference. Yeah. So we know that women in New Zealand earn less than men over their lifetime.
The gap is closing.
The gap is closing. So 2025 data actually showed that the gap narrowed from 8.2% to 5.2%.
Which is a huge difference, right?
It's kind of surprising.
It's much faster than what it's been in previous years.
It's been very incremental and small over the years. So this is really good news. It's down to 5.2%. Hopefully it continues on that
And if
trajectory.
anyone knows why it had such a big jump in 2025, please let us know.
That'd be great. Yes. So we're making less money. That's
In general,
that's a big one. And the wage gap is more pronounced the older we get. So if you're looking at 50 plus women and men, then the gap is
towards 15%, right? Rather than that 5%.
Yeah, exactly. And there's lots of reasons for that, which we'll go into. And then the lower wages just mean smaller contributions into your KiwiSaver. You're giving a percentage of your wages, and your employer is matching that. If you were on a lower income, then your contributions are just smaller.
So you're putting less into your retirement savings, and then you have less balance in those savings to then generate returns and compound over time.
Exactly. The other big one is time not contributing. So women are more likely to do part-time work.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
At certain parts in their lives, to take breaks for caregiving, whether that's when they have children and they go out of the workforce for a period of time, whether they're looking after an elderly relative or other people in their community or whānau. So when they are not working or they are working less, they are again contributing less to their retirement savings.
And those gaps are often earlier in their careers, right? Like for having kids, you're likely to be doing that in your 20s or 30s, maybe into your 40s. And that in kind of working age is fairly early on in your career.
Yeah, and so you've just explained that those differences earlier on make the bigger difference over time. It also is often the beginning of quite a uncertain period of their career where they may take maternity breaks one after the other. If they have more than one child, they may go back to work part-time. It's much more likely for a woman to go back part-time than a man at the moment, in terms of caring for the family longer term. So yeah, it's really tricky for women at that really early stage in their career. They are taking time out. That also affects their progression in their career, so they may not get the promotions and things that their male counterparts are getting, and the gap widens. The other one, and this is the tricky one, is just system design. So there are systematic and structural factors that contribute to this. KiwiSaver is fantastic. We love it. We're all about it. Biggest fans, but it is linked to income. So this means that if you have a lower lifetime income, then this is going to translate into lower contributions to KiwiSaver.
And lower retirement savings.
And then lower retirement savings, exactly. So the underlying factor is income inequality, and then the burden of domestic and family life.
All that unpaid labour.
Yes, and I'm not in any way saying that this is a burden that only women share.
Women are disproportionately impacted, aren't they?
So currently those two things mean that the system is set up to produce uneven outcomes for men and women.
And so those uneven outcomes, what are the kind of real world impacts for women, like in the long run? Yes, lower savings, but what does that really mean?
Well, they are reaching retirement age with less saved. We are likely to live 2 to 3 years longer than the average Kiwi man. So we have less, but we also have to stretch that retirement savings over a longer period of time.
So that gives you less flexibility in terms of what you do with your retirement. Obviously less financial security. So the potential to go into what we term retirement poverty, not having enough to have that comfortable life.
And those choices.
Yeah. And less women with large balances or larger balances mean that more women are going to be relying on NZ Super alone, so our pension scheme. And for some, that would obviously mean a lot tighter budgets in older age, like struggling to pay the bills. And again, this doesn't just affect women in older age. As we talked about, that gap at a younger age will likely increase to a larger gap at, greater inequality in the long term. And so, again, that's what those KiwiSaver balance stats capture, and you need to be thinking about it now as a younger woman, and knowing that a small gap is actually going to make an impact at retirement.
There are things that are changing. So if you think about the societal norms around the domestic burden, that is shifting. There are some policy changes that have occurred, such as the parental leave KiwiSaver policy. So that means that when someone goes on parental leave, if they still contribute to their KiwiSaver via their parental leave payments,
at least 3%, and probably changing to 3.5%.
then the government will make the employer contribution of 3%, soon to be 3.5%, for them. And a self-employed person could make a voluntary contribution, and the government would match that as well. So there's lots more information on the IRD website.
That's if you're on maternity leave, or is that
if you're on parental leave, yes. Right. But that's a huge improvement, because those years where you were making no contribution of your own and you were getting no employer contribution and no government contribution, that is a huge deal. Yeah. So that's what some of the things that are happening are sort of more societal or policy level. But I think it's really important for women to think about what they can do, what we can all do. So we've got a few kind of thoughts about that.
Yeah. I think the first one is, and we say this across a lot of things, is understand your KiwiSaver, know your numbers. So check in with your KiwiSaver balance, understand whether it's high or low in terms of for your age and gender, understand your contribution rate and whether you can maybe increase it to close that gap between you or your partner, or you and the average male at your age, and kind of understand the fees. So we go on about fees all the time. Fees eat into your returns. Make sure that you are paying the fee levels that you are comfortable with, and obviously trying to minimise those. Also your fund type. Are you in the right level of risk for your risk appetite and your time horizon in terms of how long until you're going to be taking your KiwiSaver out?
So those are good things to do at various points, right? Like do it now, that's a great idea, but also do it maybe annually, do it at important life events. If you're about to go on parental leave, that's a great time to have a think about that and just be really clear about where you're at.
Yeah, and optimise your KiwiSaver if you discover that it's not quite right for where you're at. Another one is practicing consistency. So even small regular contributions matter. Thinking that, I don't earn much, so there's no point in contributing to KiwiSaver, or it's tough to allow for KiwiSaver. Compounding works with you over time in terms of those returns, that balance growing. And so again, just like you were saying on maternity leave, making those contributions if you can, and then having the government match you for that paid parental leave policy will have a really big impact later on.
And that might take a bit of planning, because if you're going on parental leave, you might be going for a year or 2 years that you're not going to be working, or whatever you have chosen to do. And so that section of time when you're getting paid parental leave, that money might be the only income that you're getting. It's quite a big deal to then hand over 3% of that to get the KiwiSaver contribution from the government. But if you can plan for that and budget for that, then you continue to contribute to your KiwiSaver when you're not working, then that's a great thing. And same with part-time work. Like you said, just because you're not earning lots of money doesn't mean you can't contribute some to KiwiSaver. I think I've already kind of touched on this one, but reviewing your situation after life changes. This could be after you've been away from work, or if you're renegotiating into part-time work. It could be if you've just bought a house or done something like that. Whenever you have the option or opportunity to maybe increase your contributions.
Like after a pay rise?
Yes. Maybe if you think, I want to have a family in 5 years, I'm just going to contribute 10% to my KiwiSaver for these 5 years in the lead up to that, give myself a little bit of a head start. That would be, I wish I'd done that.
Yes, and doing that 10% earlier on rather than once you earn more later would actually likely have a bigger impact, because of the impact of time on compounding returns.
Exactly.
So the earlier that you put more in, the more you're going to set yourself up better for later on.
Also, do it before you have the kids, because they're expensive.
They are expensive little things, aren't they?
Yeah.
A really big one for women, and I think one that we've talked about in a previous episode around jobs, is understanding your pay and being able to negotiate. So where appropriate, see if you can learn strategies in terms of handling your pay reviews and income progression. Even small percentage increases like having a 1% more than what you were offered. There are loads of resources online to help you with negotiating and understanding how to tackle a pay review. So men are better at negotiating and more confident, I would say ballsy, at going for what they want. And in order to close both the income gap
and the retirement savings gap.
Yeah, we need to get better at it.
Yeah, okay.
Another one is using available policy tools when you can. So that's going back to your chat about maternity leave and how the recent change in government policy means that the government will provide the employer contribution if
you're contributing from your paid parental leave. Yes. Yep. And actually this is probably, so there's obviously government policy, so making sure you understand that and you're optimising for that. But also your employer might have some policies around part-time work or paid parental leave. Make sure you know what you're entitled to. You won't always be offered things on a plate. You might have to go and do a bit of research and talk to people about that. So yeah, it's worth finding out what your employer's policies are.
Yep. And finally, talking to your partner or your family around shared financial planning. So yes, it isn't fair and there's gaps, but shared financial goals means that potentially one partner doesn't have to carry all the retirement risk, and you can work out how you're going to get to that retirement
goal together.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess this is a bit disrupted in terms of breakups, but interestingly, KiwiSaver, and many of you might know this, but KiwiSaver is part of relationship property.
Yes.
And so if a marriage breaks down, then your KiwiSaver balances will be
part of whatever you are, negotiating and dividing. Yes. Yep.
But like always, some small steps and a little bit of knowledge can actually make a really big difference and add up over the long term to help you get ahead.
Yeah, and I think having those conversations, the earlier you do that, the better, and you can work towards those goals together.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important, just like the gender income gap, the retirement savings gap isn't a personal failing of women. We're not doing anything wrong necessarily. There's a lot of things at play and a lot of things that contribute to creating this gap. And some of it's just life realities.
Some of it's the system.
And some of it's the system. And the system is improving. And there are some things that we can all do as individuals. So I think it's just really important to remember that.
Yeah. And I think, International Women's Day coming up is a really good kind of reminder that equity matters in money as well as rights and opportunities. So we can all help each other. I think that's the theme of the upcoming International Women's Day, is women helping women. So share your knowledge, share this podcast if you know a fellow female that could kind of have a little bit of a kick up the arse in terms of trying to optimise their KiwiSaver and starting to look at that long-term planning.
Then let them know, pass it on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day to you.
This podcast contains personal opinions and is intended to provide educational information only. It doesn't relate to your particular financial situation or goals and is not financial advice or recommendations. Simplicity New Zealand Limited is the issuer of the Simplicity KiwiSaver scheme and investment funds. For product disclosure statements, please visit Simplicity's website, simplicity.kiwi.